Hello, everyone. This is not just a story. This is a memory someone might be living right now. If this touches you, please like the video and subscribe. Share your city and the hour you're watching this. Let's remind each other we are not invisible. Now turn off the lights, find a quiet space, and let's begin. The invitation was never spoken aloud, only implied in the clatter of dishes and the soft scrape of a fork against ceramic. I had spent the afternoon preparing rosemary chicken, Travis's favorite as a child. The recipe was mine, passed down from my mother, the scent of garlic and lemon thick in the air. The cranberry pie sat cooling on the sill, the sugar crust still crackling as it settled. I had lit the candles, just 3, one for me, one for my son, and one reluctantly for her. The seat across from mine stayed vacant, though it had been set with my best linen napkins and the silverware I'd polished by hand. I sat with my back straight, trying not to smooth the tablecloth again. I'd done it twice already. The casserole sat steaming between us, the steam lifting gently like a breath, trying to fill a hollow room. He was late. They both were. At 6:47, headlights brushed against the curtains. My hand tightened around the handle of the water jug. I rose quickly, wiping my hands down my apron out of habit, even though they weren't wet. The door opened. No knock, no hi, Mom. Just footsteps, one heavier, one brisk. Travis stepped in first, tugging at the zipper of his coat like he was already halfway out the door again. Sabrina followed. Pregnant. Beautiful, of course, in that effortless, glossy sort of way. A designer coat swallowed her frame and clashed loudly against my floral wallpaper. She didn't say hello, just looked around and muttered, "Still smells like cedar in here." I ignored the comment. Dinner began in quiet motions. Plates passed, water poured, a silence too thick for comfort, but too early for confrontation. I'd hoped for softness, a gentle evening, maybe even a memory made. But what I received instead was this. Travis with his elbows on my linen clearing his throat. "So Mom, Sabrina and I were thinking it might be good if we stayed here for a little while." I blinked. Just until after the baby, he added eyes darting to her for backup. She didn't even look up from her phone. Too noisy in the city. I need calm, and your place, it's got that retirement vibe. I smiled faintly, unsure whether to be offended or simply invisible. "This is my home," I said softly. "Exactly," Travis jumped in, "and you've got the whole place to yourself. Wouldn't it be better if you had a little more peace and quiet?" We were looking into Sky Haven. They've got art classes, yoga, all that. Sky Haven. It's assisted living, Sabrina clarified. They have nurse staff, medication schedules, meal plans. It's a great fit for someone your age. Someone your age. As if my calendar years had suddenly become a burden. As if motherhood came with an expiration date. My fingers tightened around my fork. "You want me to move out?" "Just for now," Travis said, trying to soften his voice, "or if you'd prefer, you could stay and help us. Just until Sabrina's recovered. Cooking, laundry, that kind of thing." Sabrina chuckled. "Or babysitting, that's what grandmas do, right?" It landed like a slap. I looked between them. Their coats still hung by the door. Their bags were already inside. They hadn't come for dinner. They had come for the house. The trigger wasn't loud. It wasn't a shout or a slammed door. It was the way Travis called it, the house, not your home. The way he assumed my absence was negotiable. The way Sabrina reached across the table and moved the cranberry pie without asking, smudging the edge of the dish I'd inherited from my mother. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a visit. This was an occupation, and I was the ghost they wanted out. I smiled politely like the gracious host I'd always been. Then I reached beneath the table, unfastened the apron strings, and stood. "Excuse me," I said, folding the cloth neatly beside my plate. "Where are you going?" Travis asked, confused. I looked down at the pie one last time and whispered, "To find my own quiet." I didn't leave that night, not fully. My body remained in the house, moving through its corridors like a whisper. But something inside me had already begun to shift. The next morning, I made tea the way I always did. 1 Earl Grey steeped for exactly 4 minutes. I added a splash of milk, stirred twice counterclockwise. My husband used to joke that if I stirred it the other way, the universe might unravel. I stood by the window as the morning light filtered through lace curtains. Outside, frost rimmed the garden path. The bird bath was frozen over, but the chickadees still came hopping like hopeful little prophets. Upstairs, I heard muffled footsteps and the thump of a suitcase. Their things were unpacked. I hadn't given permission, but they hadn't asked. I moved through the kitchen like it still belonged to me. The toaster was different, sleek, chrome, New. My grandmother's old recipe box was gone from its usual spot on the shelf. Replaced, not misplaced, replaced. The kind of quiet betrayal that tells you've already been edited out. I opened the drawer beneath the stove where I used to keep my handwritten tea labels. Chamomile, mint, cinnamon rose. Each one had my script on the lid, the kind my son once mimicked with crayons. But they were gone, swapped for tins with pre-printed fonts uniform and cold. The house smelled different too. No more rosemary or vanilla sachets, just plastic wrap and new paint, the scent of erasure. Sabrina padded in barefoot, her phone glowing blue against her face. "Did you know the carpet upstairs smells like dust?" she asked, voice nasal and flat. "We'll need to rip that up." I asked quietly, not looking at her. She shrugged. "It's for the baby. Allergies and all that. You get it right." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. No offense, just time for something modern. She moved past me and opened the cupboard above the stove, pulled out a chipped ceramic mug, my husband's, the one with the crack down the handle he refused to fix. He said it made it unique, said it reminded him of me. Without pause, she tossed it into a cardboard box labeled "Donate or Toss." "I'll take care of that," I said. Sabrina blinked, confused. "Sure, whatever works." I picked the mug out quietly and cradled it in both hands, turning it like an artifact. The crack was still there. So was the memory. I didn't cry. I just placed it gently back on the counter next to the empty tea tin labeled Earl Grey. Upstairs, Travis's voice echoed from behind the study door. "No, I told her we'd handle it. The paperwork's not an issue. Yeah, I know the house isn't in my name yet." Yet. That word rang like church bells in a silent graveyard. He wasn't just moving in. He was planning my absence like it was a formality. After lunch, I took out the trash. The bag was heavier than usual. When I lifted it, something clinked against the side. I opened the lid and stared. My grandmother's recipe box, bent upside down, cards spilling out like memories trying to escape. The mug was in there too, along with a framed photo of Travis at 5 standing next to the snowman we built during the blizzard of '89. I remembered his gloves that day. Red, one missing. He cried when we couldn't find it. I gave him mine instead. My hands were raw for days. I reached in and pulled everything out, brushing off breadcrumb dust from the edges. I held the photo frame, its wood warm from the sun, and wondered how a memory so sacred had become disposable. Inside, I found Dolores's postcard again, still crooked on the fridge. "If it ever gets too heavy, our doors are open. Love, D." I pressed my thumb against her signature, tracing the ink like a blessing. Dolores had been my best friend since college. We hadn't spoken in months. She'd moved into Skyview a year ago, said it was like breathing again after years underwater. At the time, I thought she meant the meals in the social calendar. Now I think she meant something else. Something about having a space that wasn't always trying to redefine you. That evening, I crocheted in the corner chair, the one near the window. I used to sit there with Travis when he had nightmares. We'd make little wool creatures, bears, owls, once even a crooked giraffe. He never remembered those nights, but I did. Every stitch was a lullaby, every thread a promise. The television murmured in the other room, some show with canned laughter. I didn't recognize the voices. I didn't try to. I reached for the journal I kept hidden behind the bookshelf. Inside were years of birthdays, pie recipes, winter thoughts, and things I never said aloud. I opened to a blank page and wrote just one sentence. "I am here but not invited." That was the night I stopped folding his laundry, stopped setting 3 plates, stopped pretending that love was measured by how small I could make myself in my own home. It didn't happen all at once. That kind of betrayal, family-shaped and quiet, doesn't arrive with thunder. It arrives slowly, like cold seeping into old floorboards. 3 days after they arrived, I realized they'd stopped calling it your place. It became the house then, our space then, finally home. Not mine, theirs. On the 4th morning, Sabrina redecorated the hallway without asking. My wedding portrait, the one where Robert had kissed the top of my head as I laughed, was taken down, replaced by a mirror, modern, black-rimmed, soulless. I found the portrait leaned against the garage wall behind paint cans and a broken vacuum. The glass was cracked across our faces, like even the memory of us had fractured under the weight of being unwanted. I took it inside, didn't hang it up again, just placed it on my nightstand facing inward toward the side of the bed I still slept on. Robert's side, still, after all these years. Travis noticed. "You should let that go, Mom. It's been over a decade. You don't need to hold on to ghosts." I nodded, but I didn't turn it back to the wall. That same evening, as I stepped out to get the mail, I caught the tail end of a conversation between them. They were in the kitchen. The door was slightly ajar. "If she won't sign it, we just wait," Sabrina was saying. "She's already on her way out emotionally. The rest is paperwork." Still, Travis said, his voice hesitant. "It feels harsh. She's my mom." Sabrina laughed. Not cruelly, just impatiently. She had her life, her marriage, her turn. Now it's ours. I dropped the mail. A coupon flyer fluttered to the porch tiles. Her turn, as if motherhood were a rental contract, as if love came with an eviction notice once you reached a certain expiration of usefulness. I didn't confront them, didn't scream, didn't weep. Instead, I swept the porch, each motion deliberate, measured, like prayer. The deep cut didn't come from the conversations, it came from the silences. Like when I found the family recipe cards gone again, this time tucked behind jars of powdered formula and protein bars. Or the day Travis signed for a delivery in my name without telling me. A new sofa, sleek, gray, cold. They had already moved mine into the garage by the time I came down from my nap. "My back can't handle that old one," Sabrina said. "No offense, but it smelled like old lavender." It did smell like lavender, because I used to tuck sprigs from the garden into the cushions. Robert said it reminded him of our first honeymoon cabin. But I said nothing. I just stood there, one hand on the banister, the other pressed to the hollow in my chest that used to be filled with home. A week passed. The final insult came wrapped in practicality. A printed-out brochure slid across the breakfast table. Skyview Residence, independent living, optional art programs, nurse access, library and garden space. A cheerful font spelled out, "Rediscover what matters most." "I called for you," Travis said, avoiding eye contact. "They said you could have a south-facing unit, privacy, quiet." Sabrina added, "They even have a spot open this month. It's like a sign." I studied the brochure. A woman smiled back at me from the cover, gray-haired and too cheerful, sipping tea in a staged garden. I looked up slowly. "You've been planning this." It's not like that," Travis said. "We just thought." "You just thought I'd agree. Smile, leave." Sabrina folded her arms across her belly. "You wouldn't be alone. Dolores is there, right?" That name struck me. A wound and a balm in one breath. Dolores. She had offered, months ago. Said it was peaceful. Said I'd feel safe. Back then, I dismissed it. I told myself I had everything I needed in this house. But that was before the halls grew colder. Before my memories were boxed up like clutter. Before my son became a stranger. That night, I found a note on the hallway console. A grocery list, scribbled in Travis's handwriting. Oat milk, prenatal vitamins, frozen waffles. Maybe get rid of the old curtains. I stared at that last line. Not buy new curtains, but get rid of. That's how I knew I wasn't seen anymore. I had become a fixture, like a curtain, useful once. Now just in the way. At midnight, I couldn't sleep. I wandered to the attic barefoot and quiet. Up there, it smelled like cedar and winter and time. I pulled out an old shoebox. Inside, a collection of receipts, postcards, and ledgers written in Robert's heavy hand. I hadn't touched them in years, but the ink hadn't faded. In one envelope, I found the deed. Still in my name, no cosigner, no beneficiary. I smiled for the first time in days, not with malice, not out of vengeance, just relief. They hadn't taken that from me. Not yet. I reached for my journal and wrote, "I have not disappeared. I am just unobserved." I didn't speak of the deed, not to Travis, not to Sabrina, not even to Dolores, though I wrote her a letter that night I never sent. Instead, I moved slower, like the world had turned to glass. Not out of fear, but to preserve something, dignity maybe, or the last shards of what once was ours. The days blurred into one another. Morning tea, muted footsteps overhead, laughter through closed doors, boxes stacked in corners that used to hold family photos. I noticed the way the walls stopped echoing, as if the house had begun retreating from me, not haunted, just emptied. One afternoon, Sabrina reorganized the pantry. My jars, decades old, handwritten, lovingly mismatched, were replaced with bright plastic bins, each one labeled in black sticker font, pasta snacks, baby supplies. I reached for my rosemary sachet tucked behind the salt tin. It was gone. Travis walked in holding a laundry basket. He didn't notice the change. Or maybe he did. Maybe he had learned to pretend not to. "Can you switch this load in an hour?" he asked. "We've got the birthing class Zoom at 6. I stared at him. "This is my laundry room." He laughed lightly. "Technically, it's ours now. We all live here." I said nothing. He didn't hear the silence. I went for a walk that evening. The streets were quiet save for the soft rustle of wind in the bare trees. Harriet's Diner was still open, its neon sign blinking like an old heartbeat. Inside, Cheryl was behind the counter wiping down glasses. She looked up startled, then smiled wide. "Miss Langley, haven't seen you in a while." I nodded, sat at the corner booth, my booth. Robert and I used to sit there every second Friday. Always ordered hot cider and fries with extra pepper. "Still remember your order?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "You always did." The mug she placed before me was warm and heavy. Real ceramic. No plastic, no barcode. "Everything okay at home?" she asked softly. I wrapped my hands around the cup. Didn't answer. Didn't need to. She gave me time. Across the table, someone had left a newspaper, folded to the community page. In the corner, a soft ad bordered with snowflakes read, "Skyview Estates Winter Art Program. Rediscover what you left behind." I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't understand, but because I finally did. Rediscover, not start over, not escape, but return to something real, something mine. I paid in cash, left an extra tip, and walked home with the paper folded beneath my coat like a secret. The next morning I called Skyview. The woman on the line had a voice like warm tea, calm, inviting, no rush, no condescension. I asked about a private unit. She said yes, one had just become available. South-facing, fireplace, second floor, a small balcony, and best of all, silence. She asked if I'd like to see photos. I said no. I'd already seen them in Dolores's eyes when she described it. We talked price. I asked if I could pay in full. She said yes, and I felt something in me release. Not relief exactly, more like agency. That evening I opened Robert's old ledgers. Each line a quiet love letter to practicality. I found the last page, the emergency savings. Still untouched, still mine. Enough for Skyview, enough for something else too. I dialed Mr. Leland's number from memory. He had been our attorney since Travis was a toddler. His assistant picked up. I left a message. "Tell him Meredith Langley would like to transfer the house by Friday and prepare a grant in Robert's name." Later, I sat by the fireplace with my journal and wrote, "Just because I am silent does not mean I consent." It was the first time I truly believed it. I didn't pack loudly. No suitcases sprawled across the hallway. No sounds of drawers yanked open. No scenes. Just the rustle of fabric, the click of a lock, the steady breath of a woman reclaiming her time. I chose the midnight hours, when the house softened, when even betrayal seemed too tired to whisper. The first thing I packed was Robert's journal. Then the framed photo, the cracked wedding portrait. The last piece was my crocheted throw, the one that still held the faint smell of cedar. The note I left for Travis was plain sealed in a linen envelope. I placed it on the desk beneath the lamp just left of center. Inside, the deed now transferred to a charitable trust, a termination of shared bank access, a letter releasing him from any claim or burden. No anger, just finality. I made breakfast early that day, oatmeal, not for them, for me. Sabrina patted in bleary-eyed, phone in hand. "We're out of vitamins," she said, not looking up. "Can you grab some if you head out?" I didn't answer. I reached for my scarf instead. Wool, pale gray, the one I'd knit the winter after Robert passed. Travis stumbled down minutes later, pajama shirt inside out. He looked at me. "Mom, have you seen my tablet?" "Try the couch cushions," I said with a smile. "Oh, right." He disappeared again. Outside, the snow had begun early. A soft flurry, not storm, just reminder. On Main Street, Leland and Associates stood between the old stationery store and the abandoned barber shop. Inside, Mr. Leland greeted me with the same practiced calm. "It's all ready," he said, just as we discussed. I signed the final page, property transfer, asset consolidation, and a charter for the Langley Art Grant. "A foundation," he asked. "For women over 60 who've forgotten how to paint," I replied with a smile. He paused. "You're doing the right thing." "I know," I whispered, "but it still feels like mourning a version of myself." He didn't speak, just nodded, and handed me the folder with quiet reverence. When I returned, the house was louder, music blaring from upstairs, laughter from the television. I walked through the kitchen like a guest. The casserole dish I'd used for Sunday dinners was now clean and untouched, drying beside a sponge. I wrapped it gently in a towel, slid it into the back of the cupboard. I wouldn't need it where I was going. Sabrina stood by the fridge. "Do we have more almond milk?" she asked, glancing at me. "You'll have to manage without me," I said softly. She blinked, confused. "What?" I walked past her, up the stairs, into my bedroom. The note was still on the desk, unopened. It would wait for him, like I had, too long. That night, I didn't set the table. I lit a single candle instead. Not for dinner, for closure. I sat beside it in silence, tea in hand. The walls no longer echoed, but they no longer accused either. I let the flame burn, small, unbothered, mine. The morning I left was not filled with sorrow. No weeping goodbyes, no slamming doors, no suitcases thudding against stairs. I rose before dawn. Skyview had confirmed the suite would be ready by 10, south-facing, quiet. I dressed slowly, choosing the soft blue sweater Robert once said made me look like sky in winter, the same sweater I wore to Travis's college graduation. He hadn't noticed then. He wouldn't notice now. I wrote one last note, a single word, folded neatly, pressed against the vanity mirror with a piece of gold tape. Departure. I added the date beneath it, not for memory, for witness. By mid-morning, the house had quieted. Travis was still upstairs. Sabrina slept on the couch, one hand resting on her belly, the other still loosely gripping her phone. A show played softly on the television, something about home renovations. I stood by the doorway for a long while, looking, not lingering. The air inside the house had turned colder, not from the weather, but from something less nameable, the way a place withdraws from you even as you remain inside it. I zipped the suitcase slowly. It didn't creak, it whispered, "It's time." On Main Street, the town seemed unaware of my goodbye. Children played in yards. The bookstore had a sign up for winter readings. Harriet's diner glowed softly in the distance. Leland and Associates stood as I'd left it, still, silent. Inside, Mr. Leland rose as I entered. He handed me 2 envelopes, one marked to be opened after departure, the other Langley Grant founding documents. I held them both like heirlooms, not just legal papers, but proof of something enduring. Back at the house, the hallway felt longer than usual. I placed the envelope on the hallway table, adjusted it once, then turned. I didn't look back, not until I reached the sidewalk, not until the wind lifted the edge of my coat and I felt the snow touch my cheek like a farewell. Skyview sat on a hill just past the river. The entrance was lined with bare trees. Each branch looked like it had been drawn in charcoal against the gray sky. Dolores met me at the door. She wore a red shawl wrapped like a gift she hadn't unwrapped yet. "Told you," she whispered. "It would feel like breathing again." And it did. Inside, the air was warm, smelled like cinnamon and fresh flowers. No demands, no unspoken expectations, just space. To be. That afternoon, I stood in my new room, placed the photo of Robert on the windowsill, lit a candle, sat. A knock came softly on the door, Dolores again. "In the lounge," she said. "They're painting orchids." I smiled. "Do I have to?" "No," she said, "but I'll guilt you into it." I followed her down the hallway, and as I walked past the community board, a quote from a book I once loved caught my eye. "Some spaces keep you small if you let them." It was handwritten, Dolores's script. I didn't reply, just smiled, because I finally understood. The room they gave me at Skyview was simple. A bookshelf built into the wall, a fireplace trimmed in dark oak, a window that bathed the floor in gold by mid-morning. It wasn't the space that changed me, it was what it lacked. No one questioned the way I stirred my tea. No one moved my photo frames without asking. No one corrected my quiet. That kind of silence is its own kind of music. I started attending the art sessions, first as a participant, then as something else. The instructor, a young woman named Nora, noticed me watching. "You draw?" she asked. "I used to," I said. "Would you again?" I hesitated. She handed me a blank sketch pad. "You don't need to be good, just honest." That afternoon, I sat near the orchid planter and drew the bloom nearest the window, its petals slightly torn, bruised with frost, but still open, still defiant. A week later, I received a letter. No return address, just my suite number written in trembling blue ink. Inside, "Mom, I don't know if you'll ever read this or if you'll keep it. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to write it. I've been staying in a room above a garage. No heat, but it's mine. I make coffee in a dented percolator. It burns, but I drink it. I go to meetings now. They help. I talk about you sometimes. I used to think love was a currency, that if someone stopped paying it meant they stopped caring. But now I get it. You didn't stop loving me. You stopped letting me spend it recklessly. If I ever see you again, I don't want a place to stay. Or money. Just maybe. Maybe you'll look at me like a man, not a disappointment. I understand now. There was no signature. Just the folded apology of someone finally learning the cost of taking too much. I placed the letter in a drawer beside Robert's old notes. Not for closure, for memory. Because remembering is sometimes the bravest thing you can do when forgiving isn't ready yet. At the next art exhibition, Nora asked me to speak. I hesitated at first, then stepped forward, not as Meredith Langley, the mother, not as the wife or the widow, Just me. I used to think that starting over meant going back, I told the room, to the woman I was before the pain, before the betrayal. But now I know it means becoming the woman who could only exist after surviving it. The room was quiet. A few heads nodded. Nora smiled through soft tears. This part, I said, hand pressed to my heart, this part is mine. Later that night, I returned to my room. Dolores had left a gift at the door, a new ceramic mug, hand-painted, orchid on one side, the word begin on the other. I brewed tea, chamomile this time, sat in the rocker, and let myself feel full, not of regret, but presence. Back at the house, the atmosphere had shifted, though no one said it aloud. Travis paced the living room holding a folder. His jaw clenched, his thumb rubbing the edge of the page until it tore. "What do you mean it's not in my name?" he snapped. Mr. Leland, calm as ever, adjusted his coat collar with slow fingers. "It's been transferred," he said. "To who?" Travis asked, voice cracking. "The question is irrelevant now," the lawyer replied evenly. "You are no longer listed." "That's impossible." Travis fumbled with the final page, my signature unmistakable at the bottom. The signature that had once signed permission slips, camp forms, and birthday cards. The same signature now closing a door he thought would always remain open. Behind him, Sabrina stood, rigid arms folded tightly beneath her belly. "I'm not raising a baby in someone else's leftover life," she hissed. "Do you think I planned this?" Travis shot back. "She's trying to punish me." Mr. Leland didn't blink. "No, she simply stopped being your plan B." The house looked different now. The fridge was nearly empty, the laundry undone. Dust gathered along baseboards that used to gleam. Sabrina moved from room to room like a stranger in someone else's dream. And Travis. He sat on the couch surrounded by unopened mail, muttering beneath his breath. Not angry anymore, just lost. Meanwhile, at Skyview, I moved through my days gently. I began teaching a sketching class. Dolores claimed it was so she could get out of Tai Chi. "You're an artist again," she said one afternoon as we planted orchids in the garden room. "No," I smiled. "I'm someone who finally remembered she was allowed to be." She squeezed my hand. That evening, as I placed my latest drawing on the bulletin board, I noticed something pale tucked beneath the door. A folded sheet of paper. No envelope, no name. Just my suite number in shaky, uncertain handwriting. I bent down and picked it up carefully. Inside. I was wrong. I see it now. I see what you gave up, and what you were never asked about. I thought being a man meant making space. I never realized how often I was just taking it. Thank you for not yelling. Thank you for leaving with dignity. Thank you for teaching me what silence can mean. I hope one day you can look at me not as a son who failed you, but as a man who is trying to grow into your example. That's all. I folded the letter once, then again. Placed it in the drawer beside the others, a quiet collection of love loss and unfinished sentences. In the community hall, we were preparing for the holiday exhibit. Hand-tied wreaths, painted ornaments, tiny paper snowflakes. The room buzzed with warm energy. Nora approached me, cheeks, pink eyes wide. "I saved this one for you." She held out a small canvas. Watercolor, a soft gray orchid blooming in the corner, a faint window behind it. She had titled it in gentle handwriting, "Still Orchid." "You painted this for me?" I asked. Nora nodded. "You don't look like someone who left," she said. "You look like someone who began again." I couldn't find the words, so I reached for her hand and held it. The snow had come in earnest by the time the holidays arrived. At Skyview, the garden wore its white coat with quiet elegance. The orchids had been brought inside. One of them, the one I'd drawn first, had bloomed again, slightly crooked but open. Just like me. In the evenings, I'd sit by the common room fireplace with my mug, always the same one, the orchid mug Dolores gave me. Sometimes I read, sometimes I just listened. There was a piece here that didn't require explanation. It didn't ask where I'd been. It didn't try to fit me back into old roles. It simply said, "Stay." I heard from Travis again. Another letter, this one longer. The handwriting was steadier, still familiar, still searching. He wrote about his new job, warehouse work, cold mornings, long hours, but he called it honest. He said he'd started cooking, asked if I still had the casserole recipe, the one with rosemary and lemon zest. I didn't reply, but I sent a copy, typed, with a handwritten note at the bottom, "Use fresh rosemary if you can. Dried isn't the same." Dolores and I had made a tradition of walking the Skyview halls each night before bed. We'd loop past the greenhouse through the quiet library and end at the piano room. Some nights someone would be playing softly notes, drifting like lullabies. One night as we passed the mailroom, a nurse stepped out with a small box. "Miss Langley." I paused. It was postmarked from my old address, Travis's handwriting on the corner. Inside, the old mug, my tea tin, and a photo. One I thought was lost. Robert, Travis, and me, backyard picnic, summer of '92. Travis wore red gloves. I remembered that day. He cried when he lost one. I gave him mine. My hands were raw for days. I placed the mug on the windowsill, next to Robert's photo. They didn't match. That was the point. Some things don't need to match to belong. The Langley Art Grant launched quietly. No ribbon cutting, no speeches. Just a printed flyer on the Skyview bulletin board and a note tucked into the community newsletter. For women 60 plus rediscovering their voice through art. Supplies provided, no prior experience required. Only courage. We filled all 10 spots in 2 days. Nora asked me once if I missed them. Travis, Sabrina, the house. I thought for a long moment, then said I miss who they were, not who they became. She nodded slowly. And the house. I looked out the window where snowflakes danced in the glow of garden lights. The house is still there, I said, but I am not. Some stories don't end with reunions. Some don't even end with forgiveness. But they still end with healing. And healing, I've learned, doesn't always come with a hug. Sometimes it comes with silence, a pen, a page, a painting hung on a wall you never expected to be yours. Thanksgiving came. Not the kind with 12 chairs and cranberry sauce from a can. Not the kind with forced laughter and arguments over side dishes. But the kind where gratitude felt soft and earned, like breath, like belonging. The Skyview brunch was simple slices of turkey, warm cornbread muffins, cranberry compote in tiny porcelain bowls. No one said what they were thankful for. We didn't need to. It was in the way we passed the sugar, in the way Dolores nudged my elbow when I reached for a second helping, in the quiet way Nora placed a folded napkin beside my plate the color of lavender. After the meal, I walked to the greenhouse corridor. The orchids were blooming again. One in particular, a pale violet bloom with a slight tear on one petal, had caught the light in just the right way. I pulled out the sketch pad from my bag. My hand moved slowly, deliberately. I didn't rush it. I let the silence fill in the space between lines. Each stroke said something I couldn't. Each imperfection became part of the truth. The petals came out crooked, but they were mine. Later that evening, I visited the garden alone. The snow had melted just enough for the earth to soften. I knelt slowly, pressing one hand into the soil. I planted a single orchid. No plaque, no dedication, just roots and intention. Behind me, Nora appeared. She didn't speak, just reached for my hand and helped me to my feet. Her fingers were cold, but steady, and in that small gesture, I felt everything I needed to feel. The final letter came a week later. This time it was signed. Mom, I know there are no do-overs. I know what I said, what I didn't say cut deeper than I ever understood. But I want you to know, the house feels empty without you. Not because of the chores, not because of the meals, but because no one listens like you did. And maybe that's what I never learned, that your silence wasn't absence. It was presence with no demand. I don't expect an answer. I just wanted to leave this behind. Thank you for loving me even when I wasn't easy to love. For walking away without slamming the door, for letting me see the shadow I became and not hating me for it. I hope I can one day be as quiet and as strong as you. Travis. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer, not next to Robert's, but beneath it, because some love doesn't need to compete. It just needs to be placed gently in a quiet room and left to breathe. That night, I sat by the piano room window. Dolores walked past, tapping the bulletin board. We're doing hand-tied wreaths next week, she said. Better sign up. I smiled. Do I get extra points if I make 2? She winked. Only if you don't cry while you're tying them. And that's how this part ends. Not with a grand gesture, not with revenge or regret, but with a woman in her 70s, planting an orchid in thawed earth, sketching crooked petals that look exactly like truth, and sipping tea in a place that feels like breath. Because healing isn't about going back, it's about arriving finally where you were always meant to be. If you've ever felt like the room you spent years building no longer knows your name, if you've ever looked across a dinner table and realized you were the one uninvited, then maybe this story was for you. Meredith didn't slam doors. She didn't scream her worth. She didn't demand recognition from those who had learned to look through her. Instead, she stood and walked away, not out of anger, but out of remembrance of who she was before the forgetting began. Because dignity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just quietly packs a suitcase and takes the last piece of cranberry pie with it. Too many women give until they're hollow, believing love means surrender. But the deepest kind of love, it's the kind that turns inward when the world forgets how to hold you. This story is not about escape. It's about return to art, to friendship, to space. So if you're watching this at 2 a.m. lights dimmed, wondering if your silence still matters, it does. And maybe it's time to stop waiting for someone to understand. Maybe it's time to understand yourself. Because the quietest kind of justice isn't served at court. It's lit by a single candle next to a sketch pad in a room where the air doesn't question your presence. If this story touched you, leave a comment for someone who's always been there, someone who held you in their silence. And maybe finally hold yourself there too.